All right, welcome to another episode of the Tire GP. Today we are super excited because we are joined by somebody who has actual F1 credentials, not like you and I, Shez, like not just two tired dads sitting and sort of shooting from the hip, if you will. Today we're joined by someone who I believe is a pioneer in the sport. He has raced himself. He has worked with the Formula One team in a variety of roles. He's been a frontline leading marketer. He is the co-host of the Inside Line F1 podcast, a very popular podcast. And of course, if that wasn't enough, he is also a TV pundit for Viaplay in Norway. Kunal, welcome to the show. We are very excited you're here.
I am very excited to be here. Thank you for having me and thank you for that fantastic introduction. If anyone, it'll be my wife and my mom who will be absolutely happy to hear other people say that. Usually it's me bragging about myself, but thank you for that.
No, and those credentials are brag-worthy as well. And your career is the envy of all of us. So we have a lot of questions for you, but I thought we would start in the most obvious place, which is who is your pick for the Formula One 2025 World Drivers' Championship and why?
Straight in there.
I would say, yeah, there we go. I would say it's Oscar Piastri
Ooh,
as the pick. I
Oof.
guess I guess that's a little left field choice because everyone who loves McLaren is ending up saying Lando Norris. But I get a feeling McLaren's going to be the quickest team, I believe, and Oscar Piastri has shown that when he's had a chance to go in for the title, he's done that in Formula 3, he's done that in Formula 2, he's going to do that in Formula 1. And I also, at some point, believe Lando is really quick, but 2025 will show whether the off season that he's had between 24 and 25, he's been able to work on one really weak area of his, and weak by my admission, not his, or maybe his as well, but which is the mental strength of the handling that pressure. I mean, the number of times he's bottled a pole position, starting spot on the opening lap, and losing the lead was probably one of those markers. So if he's cleaned up that act, then we are definitely going to have a PS3 versus Norris for the title. And that's going to be epic. But yes, my pick would still be Oscar PS3.
and so you're keeping it between the McLaren drivers. Are we giving Max a chance at all or no?
I would say if Red Bull is two tenths away or thereabouts from McLaren, pretty much at every circuit, then Max will definitely be in the fight. But I just get this feeling, again, it's a hunch. It's just after preseason testing that Red Bull will be there, but maybe the gains that McLaren is going to have through the season is going to just be that much better. And truth be told, for all the Lando Norris fans, if Lando has to win the title, I think he needs his car to be that much quicker than anyone else because then he can put it on pole, start, get, keep the lead and just run away with it like we've seen, Max do it, Lewis do it when they were dominating. So if there is a clear car advantage, I think Lando can have probably a shot at it if Oscar's not up to it, but I still pick Oscar. But if it's not a clear car advantage, if it is what we saw 2024 all over again, especially the second half with four teams in the fight, then I get a feeling Lando's going to be under a lot of pressure, which, he will be. And that's when he's going to be tested the most. And that's where drivers like Lewis, drivers like Max, you can just not rule them out because they're able to, pull out, that tenth, half a tenth of performance, which just gives them track position. And track position is everything in Formula One beyond a point.
And speaking of pressure, you have not given Lewis Hamilton any credit at all. It sounds like is Lewis in the mix or not? I mean, we're diehard. Well, I'm a Ferrari fan, as you can see, and Lewis hails from Shez's hometown. So
Literally,
him and
yeah.
I are hoping that you will give us some hope, right, for Lewis. There's nothing in it for him, huh?
I would say actually Lewis is going to be that big hope through the season, right? And if again, if there are lots of ifs, and this is the new season, lots of same or similar questions, I think Lewis is going to use 2025 to settle in to Ferrari. Lots of different ways of working, lots of different people, lots of different ethos, philosophies, etc. Uh, and Leclerc is probably going to have the run on him this season just because of the time he's had in the team. And you can't replace that sort of time with any sort of talent. It's just the natural way of going. But if Lewis has the advantage, okay, which is what he probably might need in his first season at Ferrari. Because, let's remember, it's one thing to drive the car, it's another thing to be able to have all the right shots being taken, all the right calls, whether it's leaving at the right time in Q3, getting a tow, not giving a tow, putting on the right tire. Australia's already going to be mixed weather conditions, at least based on forecasts. Lots of those things also have to fall in place, something that haven't often fallen in place at Ferrari. But I would say if the car is there, you cannot rule out Lewis Hamilton. But my feeling is that everyone's going to be there or thereabouts.
Hmm.
Just that McLaren's going to be that marginal gain ahead, which is what's going to give them and Oscar Piastri their best chance this season.
Are you thinking Oscar for Melbourne, for a Melbourne win?
I would say whoever is eventually going to go into Melbourne. There is, with the season that everyone's saying 2025 is going to be, there is no more slow start to a season and build up as the races go. Any points gained, any points lost will eventually count big time in 2025. We've got to remember we've also got that flexi wing issue that's going to get sorted, 7, 8 races into the season, which in effect makes it a two-faced championship or whatever, two formula championship. So nobody knows how that is going to go in real life. So I would say yes, Oscar winning at home I would put my money on that.
Oof. I mean, the reason I'm enjoying these questions is because you're basically settling debates that Ammar and I have had over exactly these two teams over the past week or so. So I think that the score stands at 1-1 there, Ammar, roughly.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I'm glad that we made this our own sideshow along with it.
Yeah, it has to. But Kunal, we've both been listening to the Inside Line podcast over the last year or so, and one of the things that I think we picked out that you guys seem really excited about is this sort of chance that we have in F1 this season to have 4 teams potentially all with a chance of winning, that kind of continuation of 2024. But the question I have, right, is that the kind of F1 you prefer versus a 2021 style 2 drivers in different teams with tip-top machinery, both going at it, hammer and tongs? Which one of those two appeals to you more?
I would say 2024 style Formula One appeals. And, I've made several predictions that I might just make an ass of myself come Sunday afternoon or morning, depending whatever part of the world you're watching the Australian Grand Prix in. And I would love that, right? I would love for unpredictability. I mean, the one thing I absolutely love about Formula E is that level of unpredictability. It could be anyone's pole, could be anyone's race. It's about who performs in that moment, who makes the right calls in that particular moment. And while 2021 was also fantastic. I think for Formula One to have such unpredictability is a privilege. We should enjoy that privilege. We don't often get that. You just go back 18 months, Max was winning everything that was there to win. You go back 5 years, Lewis and Mercedes was winning everything that was there to win. You go back 10 years, again, it was Red Bull and Vettel winning everything. And you go back 20 years, it was Michael and Ferrari winning everything. So having any level of unpredictability. I mean, even if, Carlos Sainz lands up on that podium with Williams, that's the kind of unpredictability that I would absolutely love, where pretty much nobody knows what the end result is. And that's what's going to drive thousands and thousands and millions of more fans to Formula One. So 4 teams in for a fight for the win. Absolutely. Could there be a 5th? Is James Walls or Alpine going to do some miracle to land up there? I would vote for that.
This is it. And the thing that excites me the most is the front wing change is going to happen in Spain. And what happened in 2012 when we had 7 different winners winning the first 7 races? Pastor Maldonado in a Williams won the race. The only thing I don't need is a fire in the garage afterwards. But otherwise, yeah, that'd be amazing. I'd love to see Carlos win in in a Williams, or Alex. Either would be
Yeah,
great.
and imagine what a story that would be. Everyone is just been feeling so bummed out for Carlos losing out
Mhm.
on a Red Bull seat, a Mercedes seat while it was vacant, landing up literally to the last or the second last of the teams. And for that turnaround to happen for Williams, for Carlos, for Formula One would be fantastic. And we've got to remember a lot of these turnarounds are not down to people. It's not that the mechanics or the engineers at Williams are lacking in any way, or the drivers. It's just down to the infrastructure they have, which is something Formula One is working very, very hard behind the scenes to level out as well. Some of the tools they all have access to. It's just it's just down to that. It's not that Carlos Sainz has suddenly forgotten how to win a race. It's just that the car is just not there, and that's the reality of the sport.
Oof, I feel. Yeah, I feel some level of sympathy for Carlos, because he's back in that building phase again, isn't he? And what's to say that when Williams suddenly become championship winners, that he gets kicked out of the team again? It seems to be Carlos Sainz's fate, doesn't it?
Bad luck.
Bad,
Yeah.
bad luck.
Yeah, that's true because he took on Lando Norris at McLaren and he came out on tops. He took on Max Verstappen at Toro Rosso, came out on top. I don't think Charles Leclerc was comfortable at all with Carlos Sainz's performances as well. And just goes to show he's been all round, in everything he's done. I think if I was to ever run a team in Formula One, it would definitely be Carlos Sainz in the
Oof.
car and on the pit wall for me.
Of course,
Yeah,
you would
yeah.
need a smooth operator for sure. Go
That's
ahead,
it.
Chez.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think he'd be the ultimate driver manager, Prost reborn, as it were. Kunal, the other thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit, I think this is something that Ammar is quite keen on as well. Just remind me, how did you and Ammar first start talking again? I seem to remember it was something
This
on
is
Twitter about
I'm taking a low blow after low blow from you, Chez.
what
I
did you
think it
guys
was
talk about?
I remember it was on Twitter. We exchanged a few
Yes.
DMs. But truth be told, I
What?
don't remember what was the topic we spoke
What?
about.
I
My
am
Twitter's
so
been going bonkers, so I've been so off. What actually has been coming in through the notifications and so on. But yes, do you have a refresher
Kunal,
for me?
you are being too kind in showing some amnesia there. But you and I, truth be told, had a little bit of a back and forth. I mean, look, people are not kind on social media these days, and people generally don't have a sense of humor. That was not the case for us. You had tweeted some excitement around fan code carrying
Yes.
Formula One broadcast into two Indian languages. I believe at that point it was Tamil and Hindi. It might have been others too. I'm not 100% clear on that, which I think subsequently we heard as of a couple of days ago, one of your co-hosts and one of our favorites, Tamil Arora, is going to be one of the broadcasters in Hindi, I believe, right? And so you and I had connected there, and and the reason I commented on your post was not so much that Formula One was not taking this or taking this wonderful step of contextualizing races in terms of languages and everything that India has to offer because the Indian market is huge. But I was more so taking the angle of I'm not a fan of Sky F1 broadcasts for a variety
Yes.
of reasons, and that was where we got connected. So this long
Interesting.
diatribe, but Shez had to get that in to embarrass me there. So, but I think this is sort of why we wanted you on here too, partly because of your broadcasting excellence and background there as well. We have been debating constantly and more recently here about, how Formula One is broadcasted around different parts of the world, particularly here in the United States. And I have found that Sky F1's broadcast has been too focused on, let's just say, the British audience or the UK audience or whatever that sphere of influence is over there. And I have lamented at times that I wish we would have access to F1 TV Pro, which we do now, but it is an additional cost, right? And these things are expensive as you start subscribing to several things. We don't even know when they cancel anymore these days. So I have lamented Sky's broadcast, and so that's why I was like, wow, this something really the Indian audiences want, or can they not just go to F1 TV Pro? So what's your general take on that? Like the idea of the drive to survivization of Formula One, if you will.
I would say so. Actually, thank you for that reminder of how we connected. And my apologies for being rude on Twitter, but Twitter is one of those blank spaces you can just say and leave it, and not
Absolutely.
everyone
You're
writes back
fine.
saying, "Can I have you on the podcast?" So thank you for still inviting me. But uh,
You
but
know,
truth be told, I think, yes, the Sky Sports F1 broadcast, lots of friends working there, behind the camera, on the camera. It is very focused towards the British audiences. It is the home of F1, as they say, because for a lot of channels around the world that are not investing in making their own content, they just buy the Sky F1 feed at an additional cost and sort of just run with that. But Sky still doesn't keep that in mind that, people in America, people in India are consuming the content. So can we neutralize it a little bit? Can we add more context apart from the British drivers and so on? They're just all in all out for the British drivers, which is why we've seen the likes of Max boycott Sky. We've seen the likes of Lando said, it's the wrong passport, wrong nationality, or whatever. So I wish that they were to go neutral, because I know Sky Sports F1 is also available on the F1 TV Pro, so you can make a choice, or at least you could make a choice on what you want to hear. So it's honestly, if you go down to why broadcasters are actually using the Sky feed, is just because the cost of production, especially sending around commentators around the world, getting paddock stories, etc., is so expensive that why don't I just give my money to somebody who's doing it? And frankly, nobody else is doing a better job in English than Sky Sports. So, it's, I would say, lack of better alternatives that everyone's landing up with Sky. And for India, we've not had a pre-race show for over a decade now. I tried really hard to get it started with the previous broadcaster, but the challenge is, even though, F1 claims there are 60 million followers of the sport in the country, a number they released just a couple of days ago, uh, the other sports are 5x that number, right? So when you suddenly are competing with the likes of cricket and kabaddi that have massive following, 60 million followers doesn't mean 60 million viewers, etc. So the challenge was always that, can we get more content than just what the live stream offers? And that's what FanCode was out to do. I created a fair amount of content for them, for Formula 2, etc. But there's nothing that can beat being there at the circuit, in the paddock, working with the teams and drivers, and that's what Sky Sports does. So that's the long and short of it. It's an economic decision, that it's just better to give it off to somebody like Sky, and let them run with it, and then let have fans pay marginally extra on their subscription so they get access to all the Sky feeds as well. And I'm actually very excited about the Hindi and Tamil opportunities that would come, because India is a vast market, as you guys know, as pretty much everyone in the world knows. Different languages in different parts of the world, or in different parts of India. And we started this with cricket being broadcast in several languages. Went to kabaddi as well, doing several different languages. Nobody's ever tried F1 and Hindi, and if that brings in newer audiences, and of course, when they say it's Hindi, it's Hinglish, as we would know, right? It's, which is, I would say, 80-85% Hindi, and uh, balance 10, 15, 20%, whatever, in English. Because somebody's asked very curiously, how would you say lap in Hindi, or how would you say I got lapped in Hindi, which is fine. How would you say aerodynamics in Hindi?
yeah, or
So
Paul, yeah, yeah.
yeah, so I think just opening up the sport. But there was this beautiful tweet that came my way saying, "Wow, I will now be able to watch Formula One with my mother," and that tweet hit me, saying, "Incredible!" It's not to say that that person's mum doesn't understand English, but Hindi is just that language which brings comfort. So
Sure.
I'm very excited with this step that FanCode has taken, and they're trying to open up newer boundaries, newer fan, segments within India, and that's probably what Formula One needs to become, a financial success.
It does stand to reason, though, now that Mohammed bin Sulayem has been on this sort of mission to make these broadcasts family friendly, right? And I imagine some of this has, on some level, got to do with what you're just saying, which is we all think of it as if our kids are going to be watching with us, but you bring up a good point in that there could be parents that might be watching the sport too, and that may be unsavory to them too. So that does stand to line there. Shez, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I guess my counter argument is that where I agree that every country should be able to have their own broadcast, and have commentary in different languages. It sounds like FanCode are taking the initiative and doing that for Formula One in India. And just on a side note, listening to Sumal Aurora doing commentary sounds like heaven. Like his mic setup is unbelievably good. But as you say, not every country that broadcasts Formula One can afford to set up their own broadcast, which is why F1 have their own entire broadcast feed. F1 TV and F1 TV Pro, although expensive for the end user, is fairly neutral, despite the fact that there's a lot of British broadcasters on it. Actually, if you're looking for something that isn't as British biased as Sky is, and I hold my hand up. I love Sky, but I live in Britain and I've been here my whole life, so for me it makes sense, right? But if you're living in the Netherlands, well then Sky Sports F1 doesn't work for you, which is why Viaplay offer you an alternative. But if the Netherlands couldn't afford to do a broadcast, well, F1 TV Pro, do they not give a bit more of a neutral perspective? Is that not what F1 are doing anyway?
No, I think you're right. F1 TV Pro is actually very, very neutral. And despite having lots of British broadcasters and commentators on their feed. But I guess, it's easy to make these decisions, right? Because F1 TV Pro, they know, is going to a worldwide audience that's paying Formula One directly versus the likes of Sky Sports or whichever other local channel that's doing the broadcast is actually paying paying the broadcaster, which in effect is an indirect way of collecting your dollars or pounds or kroner, depending on which part of the world or the three time zones we're in. But I think F1 TV Pro is the ultimate way to consume Formula One, and whether it's fan code, whether it's I would say even Viaplay, etc. They're great ways to get a larger, the Drive to Survive audience is to watch Formula One, get interested in racing. But if you want deeper access to data, telemetry, onboards, and various other ways to decode a Formula One race, I would absolutely say F1 TV Pro is fantastic, or premium, or whatever they call it these days. Yeah, just getting access to a lot of that data is what opens up so many more narratives in Formula One.
I guess.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I guess for us, one of the things that we discussed before this was the opportunity to have some choice. So, given that FanCode have got their broadcast contract in India, is F1 TV Pro still available there?
That's correct. In lots of markets, actually, broadcasters have over time allowed F1 TV Pro to coexist, so that avid fans of the sport are able to make a choice and access the sport in the way they wish as well. So it coexists in lots of markets, and it does coexist in India as well.
Kunal, you brought up Netflix earlier, and there was a story, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, suggesting that Netflix might be in the running to carry a Formula One broadcast in the United States, which I imagine, if it would happen, wouldn't just be limited to the States, because knowing what Netflix has been doing with other sports, I think that they would go for the globe, right? They would try their way to get into these markets that we're speaking of that do not have that alternative option, if you will. What is your sense, having been in this world of being Netflixed in terms of having the broadcast being done?
I know Netflix did a live streaming of one of the boxing matches last year, which was one of their first forays into live sport. Frankly, I love what they've done to Formula One, the whole Drive to Survive audience. Let's face it, the three of us wouldn't have been speaking had it not been Drive to Survive, bringing in newer audiences, creating this interest where we've all got our podcasts and several other things that we are doing, and so on, right? So I love what Netflix and Drive to Survive have done to Formula One. I've said this for several years. There was a time when movies on racing were discussed more than actual racing. Like, for example, when Rush came into the scene, it was before Drive to Survive. Everyone was discussing the cinematic racing more than actual racing happening on the tracks. And I used to tell people, wow, you've loved that movie. Why don't you watch 5 races with me? Okay. And people wouldn't show up for even 5 laps of one race. Okay. And I think what Netflix has done is successfully brought in more of those people to watch not just 5 laps or 5 races, but now 5 seasons or 7 seasons. And I think it's unique to Formula One, because when Formula One did it, suddenly MotoGP wanted one, and tennis wanted one, and cricket wanted one, and whatever. But not actually, no other sport has faced as much success, from what I know, with this whole storytelling transformation leading to more consumption of the live action as well as Formula One has. So I love it. And if Formula One was to get global streaming rights, my goodness, that's going to be epic. And for me, I would love to know how that business is then eventually set up, because we have to remember one of the largest revenue earners for Formula One are television broadcast contracts, which in different parts of the world there is somebody actually paying to get those rights and then putting it on the channel, marketing it, etc. So the economics of Netflix taking it for the world will actually be that Netflix then has to pay an equal sum of what every other broadcaster is paying, if at all, if not more, rather.
Yeah.
So the economics of such a move would interest me more than the move itself, because, after a point, we remember I used to, I worked with a couple of broadcasters in India, and the challenge people faced with sports broadcasts in India was you were only remembered for the last India match that you broadcasted, right? So if you go back and say, where was the Champions League T20 broadcast 2 years ago? Pretty much nobody would
No one
remember,
knows. Yeah.
right? So that's what would eventually happen. People will tune in wherever Formula One is broadcast, whether it's a local cable operator, a streaming service, F1 TV Pro, or Netflix. But the economics and the business of such a deal is where I think most of the complexity would go in.
Yeah,
Yeah, and what? Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that for me has been the issue with Netflix as well. It's like I think they'd be very good at doing the broadcast bit of it, but that's a live feed and they can bring in commentators and things like that. But it's the pre and post show that I find tricky. And I know that Fancode have now taken on Ted's Notebook, for example, right? So is that something that Netflix would want to do? I don't know. It's the house that Burnley built, isn't it? It's tricky.
Yeah, I'll put it this way. Even the best commentators and pundits and analysts and reporters would eventually go to whoever has the rights, right? So whenever BBC had the rights, they used to have the best voices delivering the sport to you. And when it was the other one, was it Channel 4? I can't remember.
ITV.
ITV, yeah, they had the rights, etc. So whoever eventually has the rights will be able to attract the best voices and brains of the sport to come and do the storytelling and the dissecting of whatever is happening at a Formula One race weekend.
Yeah, and that remains. It will be exciting and interesting to see what Netflix does, because what I can tell you in the United States is they have been inserting themselves in sports. So you mentioned the boxing event that happened between Mayweather and Paul, but they've also broadcasted some of the most watched NFL games during Christmas weekend, and they are trying to get in there. So I imagine that they have the financial resources to make an impact, which I imagine Formula One is looking for too. They're not just going to sell these broadcasts to anyone that's out there. But I also imagine that for Netflix, this is just a marketing campaign as they try to get more and more of us to just watch Netflix and pretty much anything, nothing else. So I think that'll be really fascinating to see. I do want to ask you, because we have this on our sort of our wish list of questions for you, which is the Aston Martin question, which is formerly your team years ago. I know that you worked for Force India, and I know it's gone through three, four iterations since then. But we're really curious about, as an executive there, what did you think was some of the greatest achievements that Force India had in sort of its iterations there? And then you fast forwarded to now. How do you look at the arc of their so-called evolution, right, with Aston Martin now? How do you sort of look at all of that having worked there?
Very interesting question. So I think this evolution that we've seen is very fascinating. I get goosebumps when I speak to people at the factory who've been around since that time. And the goosebumps are because this was actually one of the vision that Subrata Roy and Vijay Mallya also had, which was to expand the factory. Let's remember, Force India actually operated from pretty much the same factory with very basic upgrades since the Jordan Grand Prix days. Okay, and I would say the Force India Formula One team was a very Indian way of running a team. You were able to extract some amazing efficiency in the operation. Of course, we were always a customer team to Mercedes. We started the first year with Ferrari and then switched to Mercedes. We did a lot of tech exchange that was permitted under the regulations with Mercedes and of course McLaren as well. But I would say that the way Otmar ran the ship at that time, and he was, the chief operating officer, one of my bosses as well, was fantastic. They were able to, as Martin Brundle said, pound for pound, the best team. No, I have to rephrase that. He said the best points scored for pound spent team in Formula One. Bang for buck world champion, something. Yeah. It was actually our opening slide when we went to sponsorship meetings because, for the amount of money we were spending, we were actually punching way above our weight. And it didn't happen for one season. It didn't happen for two seasons. It happened for several seasons, right? So it was something we were all very, very proud of. We all knew after a point the difficulties we were facing because of various issues that the owners had. But team of very passionate people. The factory was very cozy, I would say, almost like a home, and very friendly bunch of people as well. And I say friendly because we were, of course, sitting out of Mumbai, the head offices of Kingfisher Airlines, while the factory was in Silverstone. So, marketing, commercial was split, and we used to keep traveling up and down, etc. But at no point was anyone, yeah, at no point was location a reason or time zone a reason to not carry people along. So it's an emotion, I would say, and it's a wonderful feeling. I wish the team was around. I keep saying this. I've said this publicly several times. I think Vijay Mallya was the unluckiest team owner in this era of Formula One, because he ended up or was forced to give up control of the team just when Liberty Media was
Mm.
setting in. And look at what Liberty Media have done ever since they've bought Formula One. They've made 10 very strong businesses out of the team, something that wasn't as easily possible in the previous era of Formula One.
Do you imagine that would have been a different thing for Force India had they been able to had Vijay been able to hang on to the team for a while? Like would they definitely be there, right?
Absolutely. If VGM was able to hold on to the team and whatever happened at that time with the sale to Lawrence Stroll, or actually not even really a sale, but
Mercedes,
transfer of
yeah.
assets or whatever. I think if it was 8 months, 12 months here and there, if he would have stuck around, or if he didn't have to lose that team, I think Force India would have been an even stronger emotion, I would say, because would we have been as big as Aston Martin with all those billions of pounds spent? No. Okay, but we would have still continued to be as efficient, pretty sure of that, and still been punching way above our weight. And it's just a lost opportunity for so many of us, and I would say even for India, because pretty much no other Indian billionaire is going to go buy a team in Formula One. Now you almost cannot
Yeah, you
enter
can't afford
Formula
it.
One. Yeah. And but Indian billionaires are happy with teams in the IPL and the Pro Kabaddi League. So
There you go.
yeah.
Yeah, there's
Kunal, did you ever feel though that at the point that happened? I remember when it happened, and was it Racing Point bought it for like a pound or something, didn't they? Did you ever get a sense that the Formula One community as a whole just didn't want VJ there, and that was part of the reason why it got sold on before everything got big for all the teams?
Actually, on the contrary, everyone loved and still loves VJM. He still attends the British Grand Prix, as we've seen. He's never on the official feed, but lots of fans, taking behind the scenes videos and photos and publishing them on social media. He was absolutely respected and loved within the paddock, and I think it was just is what do you say? When you're cash crunched in Formula One, the Eagles will come for you. And that's how Formula One has been in history till Liberty Media came. I mean, we guys hear about startups, right? When does a startup actually raise capital? When it's doing well, okay, or when it's done well and suddenly lost some, lost some share in the market or lost some ability, but still has the potential to build on, right? But most of the times when Formula One team was sold or was shut down was because it was just there was no money whatsoever, and that was just the reason why it went off. So it was got nothing to do with him being disliked or people feeling he's a misfit or whatever. In fact, if anything, they loved the parties that he used to host. They used to love the fact that there was this bad boy billionaire. Since we've been quoting Netflix, I'll quote them,
yeah.
who's able to who's able to balance a life around the world, running billion-dollar businesses in India while still traveling to the races and being on the pit wall and actually adding value. And I've been through meetings, I've been through debriefs, I've been in conversations where VGM was completely on top of things as they would happen. It wasn't, for the lack of a better example, if you go back to read about Flavio Briatore, he used to say, I don't care about the car build. That's the chief mechanic's job, for example. What I care about is the brand and the marketing and the money that we would make from the business, which is fair because, that's his expertise. But VGM would know exactly what it would take to make a choice or help make a choice or be a part of discussions on race strategy and what it would take to make driver selections and so on. Of course, he had the likes of Andy Stevenson and Andrew Green and Otmar Safnauer guiding him, right? But it wasn't that he would just make a wild guess and hope that it would land. So he was very, very in tune with what would take to make the car go faster eventually. And there was always this pressure. Why don't we put an Indian driver in the team? And he used to always say, if the Indian driver or any driver makes the team go fast, makes the car go fast, I would put the driver irrespective of nationality, right? And truth be told, every single driver who raced for the team was actually the best option available at that particular time while
Yeah.
making a decision.
Okay. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's a key part of that bang for your buck thing, wasn't it? I think you were there 2015. Was that when you
15 until
when
2015.
you finished?
Yeah, yeah,
So you
Yeah.
had Perez and
yeah.
Hulkenberg there. What was that like?
It was fantastic. I would
Yeah.
say
It's a good thing.
Perez and Hulkenberg would still be the best, most dependable midfield pair, in Formula One. I mean, I wish Hulkenberg would have stayed back at Haas. I really hope that this stint at Sauber doesn't take away the great talent he has. But even Checo Perez, I believe, whatever happened to him at Red Bull is by no means, it should by no means should take away from what he was able to deliver in the midfield cars. He was probably one of those world champion drivers in a midfield team. And, sometimes uh, drivers just, I would say, they're humans after all, right? And they just behave differently when it comes to the kind of expectations and pressure and everything else that goes on in top teams, which is actually a lot more than say in the midfield teams.
I think that's a really interesting point because
That's amazing.
with Perez, I have to say, but were you at all surprised by how his stint at Red Bull went, having worked with him at Force India?
I would say no, I wasn't surprised. And I was, we've had Dr. Marco on the podcast several times, and through several conversations, I could sense and understanding Red Bull's decisions and how eventually this is all a business, right? So understanding how the business was to go. I remember there was a point of time when they said we will sit and meet and discuss after the season, and one of the words that came out was the shareholders will have a meeting, and that in itself for me was the biggest clue, because shareholders don't get involved in driver decisions. Temp, I would say 9 out of 10 times. Okay. So when suddenly somebody from Red Bull said shareholders are involved, I mean, having been in the sport, you just know that when somebody says something like that, which means there is a very strong tide that's going against having the driver, renewing or not renewing, but seeing their contract off for next season. And then ultimately it was just making those right calls and assumptions and guesses based on all the information I had. And that's why we were actually one of the first ones to sort of almost break the news that thank you, but Checo Perez is not going to be a part of Red Bull's plans for 2025. So it was of course to do with paddock sources that we would have, direct and indirect ones, especially with, I would say, fairly grateful for all the information that I would get access to. But it's also about then, like, nobody's going to call you and say, listen, Checo Perez is out, go break the
Sure.
news. That's never going to happen, for example, right? But you just have to pick up the clues that come within the press, and then sort of triangulate your position of where you are, try and get some almost confirmations, or what's happening next, and then just know that, okay, drivers have usually been picked with a lot more ease, and here suddenly shareholders are getting involved, so maybe there is something happening out there. For example, if I can just use Perez as an example, I wish Checo Perez would have seen the writing on the wall. He actually had, and taken up the position at Audi or taken up a position elsewhere on the grid. I think he would have been fantastic in a midfield car. But I also believe, again, understanding how contracts go, if Checo left himself, he would get a lesser payout than if Red Bull had to ask him to go, because even that was a massive financial deal, much as we've seen with the likes of Daniel Ricciardo. I mean, for all the terrible seasons he's had, he's made millions of dollars just because he's Daniel Ricciardo, for example. So it's ultimately a business. It's about, we're going to have the Australian Grand Prix in a few days' time. If we go back to 2020, the Australian Grand Prix organizers didn't want to be the ones canceling the race. Formula One didn't want to be the ones canceling the race. And there was the FIA not wanting to cancel the race, because whoever eventually canceled it would have had to have some sort of liability payout or insurance payout or whatever. And ultimately it's a business, and those business reasons of why drivers are in or out of the car. And that's what I would say happened to Checo Perez. So I wish he would have continued. He's a fantastic guy. And I think he might just make a comeback next year.
There you go. There you go. And that is the bombshell we were looking for, to bring this interview to a close. Kunal, thank you so much for your time. The time has gone by really fast. We have plenty more questions. Hopefully you'll join us again at another time. But for today, for our audience, please like, please subscribe, please comment. We are trying to keep up with our comments. We're two tired dads. We can barely keep up with your comments, but we read all of them. He is Kunal Shah. He is the TV pundit of Viaplay F1 in Norway, and the co-host of the very exciting, very informative, and an amazing podcast, in Inside Line F1. Check it out. We'll post the link in our comments, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Thank you, Kunal.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for that introduction yet again, even at the end. I appreciate it.
It's a bookend.
Of course, of course.